Good morning, good day, and good evening to all our attendees joining us for today's latest Data Science Central webinar. I'd like to start our event off today by thanking PLATFORA for sponsoring today's event. PLATFORA has been a longtime supporter of the Data Science Central community, and we are honored to have them sponsoring today's webinar. I would also like to take this opportunity to mention and show our appreciation for some of our other recent sponsors, including Trace3, StackIQ, MapR, Databricks, Splunk, and Pivotal, to name just a few. These past webinars and many others are available on demand at datasciencecentral.com, and if you have not had the opportunity to view them, I would encourage you to take a look, as they do provide some very useful information. Today's webinar is entitled Identifying Cybercrime Using Big Data Analytics. And before we begin, I'd like to briefly review the format of today's webinar. Today's event will be approximately 1 hour long. We have two panelists that I'll introduce to all of you in just a few moments, and we should have about 10 to 15 minutes of Q&A following the presentation. And as always, this presentation is being taped and will be made available later on this afternoon at datasciencecentral.com. I would also like to encourage our attendees to provide questions throughout the presentation. We will be reviewing them and presenting them on your behalf during the Q&A portion of today's event. My name is Tim Madison, and I'm one of the co-founders of Data Science Central, and I will be your host for today's webinar. I'm very pleased to introduce today's panelists, Chris Oshiro of PLATFORA and Wayne Willis of Release to Innovation. Chris is a principal solutions engineer concentrating on financial services. He received his bachelor's in computer science at New Jersey Institute of Technology and has worked at several industry-leading and innovative business intelligence and analytics software companies. Wayne is the president and CEO of Release to Innovation, a network security consultancy focused on helping the federal government and other commercial companies leverage emerging technologies to counter cyber threats. Wayne has been working in network security for close to 2 decades and has participated in some of the largest cybersecurity programs in history. Welcome to you both, and we're looking forward to your presentation. In today's webinar, we will discuss how big data analytics solutions can make the difference in protecting your network from both known and emerging threats, and how a Hadoop-based analytics platform can provide an affordably scalable solution that provides your organization the most complete view possible for detecting both basic and advanced threats. You will learn how to discover the many ways that big data analytics solution can close the gaps in the protection offered by standard commercial systems, significantly augment your ability to monitor traffic, behavioral, and other data for telltale signs of malicious intent. Also, how big data analytics can serve as a practical and effective vehicle for advanced threat detection, providing accessible statistical analysis on massive long-term datasets to identify risks as they emerge. So with this, I'm going to turn it over to Wayne, and you can begin your presentation whenever you're ready.
Good afternoon. My name is Wayne Willis. I'd like to open by thanking Tim and PLATFORA for inviting me on this afternoon to share some of the work that I've done. I have actually worked in cybersecurity for going on 2 decades, and I'm an advocate and practitioner in big data as well. So I was identified as one of Cloudera's inaugural class of the champions of big data, and identified as a resource for President Obama's technical fellowship on cybersecurity. So without further ado, so 2013, for years you've gone to the conferences and you've spoken to rooms about the threat looming from cybersecurity, and people heard the message, but I don't know that they necessarily internalized it or recognized what a threat that it posed. I realized that cybersecurity had become mainstream when last year, when I was in the southern states in central Alabama, and somebody referred to a major threat posed by something called Cyber, which, pick up your southern translation guide, and that is people talking about, a hacking event that had occurred in central Alabama. So it became mainstream. And there were a lot of events in 2013 that really highlighted this. So, in February, there was a major breach of user accounts on social networking. A lot of the major players that you're familiar with, your Facebooks, your Yahoos, your Twitters, they're all there. So that was early in February. That was followed by a major breach at one of the software houses in the United States where 38 million user accounts credentials were exposed. Okay. Next, if that wasn't enough, one of the bedrock institutions of the United States when it comes to press was, there was an initial report that they had been attacked. And when they went in and did an analysis, a forensics analysis of their infrastructure, they found that this news outlet was pretty much owned from top to bottom. So that was good news. And during 2013, no longer were people talking hypothetically about the threat posed to critical infrastructure. There were some alarming reports that came out in the middle and late 2013 talking about actual things going on within critical infrastructure related to cyber. Very, very menacing. And then finally, something that I think everybody's familiar with because they've had to replace their credit cards is the 6 major retailers that got hit in November. And it's amazing how much data was taken there, and also the timeline associated with it. If you follow up with PLATFORA after this session about the white papers that they've put together on that, some very interesting notes related to these incidents. I mean, just taking one retailer, you're talking about 40 million credit cards lifted in one shot, and you're talking about 70 million sets of personally identifying information. These are currency. I mean, so that was just one incident. There were 5 others. Okay. One of the things that's all too often overlooked, and I really try to highlight, is a lot of the time people will see they'll see the incident and they're kind of fascinated by the incident itself. What often goes overlooked is the cost associated with these. I mean, just taking one of the events of the 6 in 2013, you're talking about $61 million in one shot that disappeared from the economy. 110 million sets of customers' personally identifying information were taken from these breaches. On average, the cost associated with an individual individual record associated with a customer is $136. Okay? This costs the U.S. economy annually $100 million, and it costs the world economy $100 billion a year. What that really translates to as well in the United States is roughly 500,000 jobs lost annually in the United States, just vaporized from this type of activity. Okay? So another complicating factor is if the things we've talked about are not tough enough, is cybersecurity is in transition. You'll see some articles that talk about it, but cybersecurity, the legacy infrastructure, dealing primarily with known threats, is phasing out. Now, these things don't happen overnight. These things happen over time. So right now, it's really a tale of two cities. You have the existing legacy infrastructures, which are more rule and signature based, which big data platforms provide the potential to augment, supplement them so that they maintain relevance until they're finally retired. What they offer us is the ability to provide statistical amplification, like in the case of IDS signatures. All too often, IDS signatures will fire all day long, but people don't look at them because it's just a dog barking. It continually happens. This big data provides us an avenue to provide statistical amplification about, here is an alarm from somebody that is on a blacklist, somebody who has had 100 IDS signatures over the last month. So it allows us to provide background data on why this alarm is different than any other. Additionally, correlation. If you look at the traditional solutions, the legacy solutions, they've been overwhelmed. They had a hard time dealing with data rates 5 years ago. Data rates today are staggering with the amount of data flowing through networks, billions of packets. Because of that, big data platforms such as PLATFORA solutions provide us the ability to correlate, not just bring all of the data into one place, but to do powerful things with it, to paint a complete picture. I saw this IP address doing something which was blacklisted, which I had 20 IDS hits. Being able to look across the data, see the entire picture. It's very much like a heads-up display in a fighter jet. So next is the next generation systems, which are dealing with unknown threats. If you look at many of the major cybersecurity think tanks, we're moving away from the traditional rule and signature-based and moving more toward a statistical modeling approach. Okay? That being said, I need to have a platform that, such as Hadoop, that I can pull all of the data into. I can pull my log data, I can pull my IDS data, my NetFlow data, even in some cases my packet data, and I can look across all of that and I can run statistical models on that saying, not just is something interesting, presenting a cybersecurity analyst with the why is this particular event interesting. So providing the backstory beyond just the numbers. Okay, these are identified in the form of tripwires. It's a series of analytics that are deployed out there that are looking for, things where relationships should not exist, places where the statistics have changed significantly in a certain area. Okay. So in order for us to confront these challenges, I recognize this is a long list, but believe it or not, it is quite abbreviated. To confront these challenges, we have to have something that can scale to the challenge that a customer can afford. If you look at the price point on Hadoop, it's pretty hard to compete with as far as the price point. So PLATFORA running on top of Hadoop natively provides you with a big data platform at the price point that you can afford. You need also, if you look at the threats such as the one that the hit on the major retailers in late 2013, you recognize that you need to store more of your primary sources, your NetFlow, your PCAP. You need to store more data because if you look at it, that really provides the window into why, the full window into why a particular event is interesting. Second is providing secondary sources and also enrichment sources that provide a greater backstory to why a specific event out of billions of events is something that's interesting. The ability to correlate at scale is an area where, working with PLATFORA since their first release is pretty hard to compete with. I mean, you have a Hadoop platform on the back end, infinitely scalable. And bringing in all of the data sources, this provides you that platform to run analytics and correlate all of the different data sources at scale. We've actually done that. The platform is also agnostic in the sense that it is able to satisfy the legacy needs of the rule-based systems and supplement them and augment them as they roll into retirement, but also provide the platform for, right now is the beginning of this new age where statistical models are being run. And a lot of people oversimplify it. I hear the anomaly detection approach. I think that's an oversimplification. It's a variety of different models that are being run out there. So the platform is truly agnostic as to the problem it is being applied against. In the morning, it may be doing malware. In the afternoon, it may be doing crimeware. So the platform really morphs into the form that I need to confront a given challenge. Okay. With that, I'm going to transition over to Chris Ashiro, and I think he's going to do a setup and walk us through a demonstration.
Hey, thanks a lot, Wayne. Push this through. Okay, so what we're going to do today, I'm going to walk through a presentation of PLATFORA, the architecture and how it addresses big data and big data issues, especially as we find in information security. First of all, just let me do a quick introduction of myself. Tim introduced me as one of the principal sales engineers. We call ourselves sales consultants, pre-sales engineers, whatever you'd like to call us. I personally have been involved in business intelligence analytics for about 15 years, from everything from structured RDBMS technologies up to NoSQL, search index type of technologies. So I have a wide range of expertise in terms of business intelligence and analytics. PLATFORA in general is a very new kind of technology focusing on big data analytics directly integrated into Hadoop. And I will go over the architecture, but needless to say, it's a technology that was born and built in the age of big data in Hadoop, so a very integrated solution stack. In today's demo, I'm going to focus on two areas of concentration, the data loss prevention and the advanced network analysis. Data loss prevention is going to focus on what we call exfiltration, data leaving the network. So as Wayne just mentioned, you want to be able to correlate multiple data sets because you want to be able to look at things like net flow, blacklisted IPs that are very far away. This means bringing in multiple different data sets, bringing in geolocation information, and be able to score them. And Wayne brought up a really good example of these statistical methods are all great, but unless you bring all these data sets together, you really can't come up with a fantastic score. So you need that kind of ability to bring all these data sets together. That's what Hadoop brings to us, and what PLATFORA allows us to do is gives this data to the network analysts at their fingertips. From an advanced network analysis perspective, we're looking at more so outside agents penetrating our network, maybe dropping in beaconing agents, maybe dropping in malware, but there's folks that are coming from the outside in. How do I identify these advanced persistent threats? How do I begin to profile these type of individuals? We want to be able to prevent data from flowing outside of our organization, and we want to be able to prevent folks from looking inside our organization. Currently, there are plenty of tools, there are plenty of solutions that help us begin to look into what those issues are. We have SIEM solutions, we have snort signatures, IDS signatures, and they're all fantastic solutions in and of themselves. But they are, by their very nature, siloed solutions. So what PLATFORA and Hadoop will do is bring these all together, be able to see everything from a contextual perspective, and be able to answer the more advanced questions, and have an extensible platform to answer questions that will come on a little bit later down the road. So first, quick order of business is to give you an idea of PLATFORA as a platform. Wayne set up the problem around big data, why it's a problem, what are the technical challenges thereof, and PLATFORA addresses this from being what we would call a full stack solution. So what we mean by full stack solution is at that bottom layer, that green bottom layer of deep processing, we have native integration into Hadoop, all of the distributions. So that means that we're able to navigate Hadoop as a file system, make it very easy to be able to identify all the objects that sit within the HDFS file system. That means we can see log files, JSON files, Avros, comma delimited files. If something was extracted from your BEA WebLogic application server and you want to bring it into the cyber solution, we'll go ahead and parse that guy for you. Anything that's very difficult to parse, we have advanced methodologies to parse that as well. So we're able to look through and navigate the file system and parse these guys out of the box. I'll show you a very brief demonstration toward the end of how we do that. In addition to that, we use Hadoop for a batch processing engine. So first let me go to that next level, which is that distributed in-memory acceleration. The distributed in-memory acceleration layer is essentially our querying layer. Right? We create these objects, data objects called lenses. Now a lens is a columnar data store that's going to be essentially a manifestation of the objects that sit in Hadoop. So on the Hadoop layer, you'll have these objects, and we will define those objects, and we will correlate multiple objects in something we call a data set. A data set is going to be a semantic layer, if you will, and full of all the business terms that will identify these numerous objects and how they're correlated together. How do I correlate NetFlow with IDS? How do I marry in that application server logic area data? How do I bring in the web click data? That all happens at a dataset level. In the in-memory acceleration layer, we have these lenses. And this is an N+1 architected solution. Much like Hadoop, that you can farm out to multiple nodes, PLATFORA does exactly the same. This is very important because when we talk about the ability to query data for cyber information security, it's nice to know what happened today. It's good to know what happened over the week. But we need historical context to understand what happens 3 months, 6 months, a year after some activity. A lot of the attacks that are happening today, not only, Wayne just made a great example of the IDS alert is going on every day. People are ignoring it because it's just like that barking dog. However, a lot of the attacks that are going on today are low and slow attacks. Someone's dropping in a beacon. It's sitting there 3 months. No one knows about it. Or maybe someone does know about it, but it's just a barking dog. How do we create the historical context to be able to identify this as a real alert? The in-memory acceleration layer allows us to have multiple terabytes at our disposal because the PLATFORA farm and architecture is set up such that we can use the server memory of each node, and we can essentially grow out that PLATFORA farm as necessary. Top layer, the orange layer, our interactive visualization layer. This is what we will call our VisBoards layer. This has all of the HTML5 technology that has all the charts and graphs and kind of dashboard environments that you would expect. This all responds to our lens and essentially is querying our lens. And the reason why this platform is particularly important in regards to information security is at the bottom layer, we have all those challenges, a lot of different data, different systems, different formats. It needs to be self-service. So one of the things that we haven't touched upon right now just yet is the concept of self-service. So when PLATFORA talks about self-service, we mean that the network analyst not only should be able to query their lens. I should be able to identify source IP, dropping data into a destination IP. I should know what the port is. But what if I don't know my byte to packet ratio? What if I need to bring packets into my lens? The network analyst should be empowered to do that. There should not be an intensive IT exercise to get that in. It should be empowered to the network analyst, and that's what we mean by self-service. Self-service is particularly difficult in the world of Hadoop because of the complexities in Hadoop. We mask all of that. We make it easy for that analyst to get in there. That middle layer is all about scale. We talked about the different data sets, different formats, terabytes and terabytes in memory, and as that memory need grows, the PLATFORA farm will grow with it. And at the top layer, visualization, it's great to have pretty charts and graphs. Obviously, when I was in business intelligence before PLATFORA, we would demonstrate all kind of charts and graphs and maps, etc., and it's all fantastic. But unless you can bring all this data in together and show contextual problem, be able to show the packet information and byte ratio alongside of the exploitable ports, alongside of blacklist data, unless you have that all together, you don't have that contextual information that makes something actionable, makes something collaborative. You want to be able to maybe yell at someone or scream at someone, but ultimately you need to be able to take action. And this kind of entire solution needs to be native to Hadoop. It needs to have a scalable solution. It needs to have a rich interaction layer. So let me go ahead and move into the live demonstration. Okay. All right, so what you're looking at here is the PLATFORA environment, all browser-based. As I mentioned before, it's HTML5. There is no thick client. This is being accessed for a visualization component, a query component, in addition to our actual navigation of HDFS. This all happens within the browser. So we're going to actually revisit this VisBoard in a second when we talk about the business context here. But what I just want to mention here off the bat is that it's interesting because when PLATFORA was first born, we were a generalist platform. We were there to essentially take advantage of the Hadoop ecosystem and really make it a reality. Our customers, in turn, started using PLATFORA and told us, hey, you know what? We have a great CISO solution, or CISO solution, however you want to pronounce it, right? Something for the Chief Information Security Officer. What does that organization need? PLATFORA brings to bear the abilities of Hadoop and the abilities of self-service analytics on top of Hadoop. So what do you need from here? You need something very interactive. So if I start off here on the upper right-hand corner, so you can see a lot of contextual information. I'm hovering over a particular point, and you can see that I have all of my byte information. I can see where my destination IP is coming from, my protocol, source IP, my snort signatures, my total records, the total net flows that are coming through the system. This is important because when network analysts come into a system, they think in terms of 5 tuples. They think in terms of source IP, destination IP. What's the source port, the destination port? What is the protocol, right? So the purpose of this particular VisBoard is to have a couple of charts that are going to give context of these 5 important tuples, right? So we're seeing here the interactivity of just being able to hover over and see all the contextual information. But if I wanted to, grab a couple of these points, I can grab them. I can isolate the selection for some further analysis. Now I'm just looking at just those particular points that I highlighted, very interactive. The next chart here on the lower right-hand corner is the incoming port activity. This one is very interesting. This is measuring essentially my source IPs over on the left-hand column, the y-axis. And it's looking at them as they scan ports in my network. So this has hundreds of thousands of points on this chart. As you see lines show up, this is very disturbing. What this means is that we have certain IPs that are scanning every port known to man in my network. I have the ability now to zoom in. I can take this functionality, this zoom option, and I can zoom in, and you can see that I'm getting a little bit more granular information. I have a couple that have a lot of activity. This guy is very active. Oh, and by the way, I'm coloring this in terms of red intensity by snort signature. So not only am I seeing source IPs that are scanning ports throughout my network, but if it's redder, it means it has tripped the IDS system multiple times. So again, I'm seeing multiple metrics within one visualization, and you can see the interactivity within that visualization as well. Lower left-hand corner is port activity. I want to see how things are going on within my network as they traverse ICMP protocol or TCP protocol. I've essentially measured this logarithmically because I have a lot of data. I want to see this kind of comparison. But more importantly, if any one of these visualizations are important and we want to share them, we can click on the snapshot option here, and I can bring essentially a very interactive image. You can see here that these are all not just images, but extremely interactive as you would expect. On the right-hand side, I have all the columns and filters, the state which creates this chart. I could have created the snapshot after I did an isolation, so I can identify a problem and then share it. And I also have the data source. Very important. When we talk about the auditability of PLATFORA, you want to be able to make sure that once we ask questions and we get answers, that I can go back to the original data and say, this is where the source data came from. So there is no question of, something was aggregated, I lost something in the aggregation. No, in fact, PLATFORA will contain an entire data lineage to be able to make sure that we understand what's going on and to make sure that we have the right answers. So we'll create a snapshot. I'm using that guy and say, hey, Tim, read this. And so, I can post this. And now we have some collaboration, inherent in the system. So, I was sharing this demonstration with Wayne Wheelis, who helped us put all this together. He's been, very critical to this entire process. And the visualizations, the interaction is very important. But he said, what the guys on the phone are going to want to know is, how do we get there? How do we build it? What is the difficulty of bringing all this together and actually making this type of environment a reality? So let me switch over to the data catalog. So you see on the upper left-hand corner where you see the PLATFORA logo, you see Home, Data Catalog, BizBoards, and System. Right now we're in that BizBoards environment, but I'm going to switch over to Data Catalog, and I'm going to show you how essentially we bring this together. So what you're seeing here is essentially a card catalog representation of all the objects that sit within Hadoop. This could be, again, log files, JSON files, etc., This is a demo environment, so I have a lot of different type of data. But I'm going to go ahead and filter this down to all of my security analytics data sets. So now I'm just looking at my blacklist data, my NetFlow data, protocol data, etc. Right? So I've gone through the process of actually picking out all these guys and essentially defining them within PLATFORA. This is that data set. The NetFlow data that happens to be in the center, really quite appropriately, is the focus of the queries, and I'm essentially bringing in the other data objects and correlating them together. So how do we do that? Let me go ahead and click on the edit button and show you the process that we bring data into our system. So what you're looking at here is our out of the box approach to parsing data. If I had NetFlow, I essentially point to that file or set of files. You can see here in my source data button that I could be looking at multiple files. So I'm not just looking at one particular file. I could be looking at a lot of data. This is very important because I don't want to just look at one file, because as new NetFlow data comes in, you want PLATFORA to incrementally augment that lens as that data flushes out. So we're able to look at a lot of information here. I have raw data that's sitting here in the background. So you can see that I have, in this case, it's a little bit more straightforward, comma delimited data. But from our parsing library, you can see that we have parsers for JSON, Avro. We have an advanced regex engine to allow for advanced parsing of files. So if you have any issues with parsing a file, we definitely can get it done. And once we have this wrangled in, once we're defining all these fields, we will then manage these fields. Essentially, we'll label them. We'll put business terms on them. We'll put descriptions. We'll have the format of the fields. We can hide columns if we need to. You can see here that I have a bunch of base columns, everything from the UID, SIP, DIP. These are source IPs, destination IPs. They all say base right on top. But if I scroll over to the right, you'll see that I have also a lot of fields that are computed. Right? So I have some computed fields, and they can be fairly complex. In this computed field, I'm pulling in the file name, but in the next computed field, I'm doing a regex and a concatenation. Certainly, you can have mathematical calculations as well. We have a full library of functions that you could use to make these computed fields. We also allow for you to ingest your own functions as well. We recently added some new functionality specific for cyber, where we're translating IPs into geolocations, etc. So on the bottom, we have this references tab. Here is the way we actually correlate these other data sets to my NetFlow data. So I have my protocol mapping, I have the TCP flag mapping, I have my blacklist data, I have my known port exploited data, and so on. Very important. Obviously we're going to have all of the time data dimensions and the snort IDS signatures all being correlated within this NetFlow data. So if I click on the snort IDS signatures, you can see that it's just a simple relationship we're creating here. And once this data set has correlated all of these individual objects, we have what we call that data set, that metadata that describe all of our lenses. So if I filter down again, take a look at my security data. Let me show you our entity dashboard here, where we're showing not just the actual data set here, all of the fields that are available. Indexed here are all of the fields that have been correlated in, and I also show all the viz boards that have been built off this data set. I show all the lenses that have been built off this data set. The process of creating data sets and correlating them together is, quite frankly, the hardest part of PLATFORA. But once you've gotten that, once you've gotten to the point where you've brought in all of the data and correlated this, you can create these lenses very simply. You can then create viz boards immediately. So let me switch back to the lens, because all I have to do is click on this Cyber Demo DSC link that you see here in the upper left-hand corner. It'll bring me back to the viz board. And I want to talk specifically about the upper left-hand corner KPI. Is our top 100 downloaders with correlated snort. So what this is showing is source IPs that are external to our network, flowing data to destination IPs that are internal to our organization. The size of the actual bullet, if you will, the size of the actual plot is sized by bytes coming in. So if I extend my filters here, you can see on the bottom right-hand corner, bytes is actually making that plot size a little bit larger. Also, very important, I have a snort signature size. So anytime you see a plot that has sort of a pink halo, or in this case, a red halo, it looks very much like a target, that's because I'm adding an additional metric to this plot point. I'm not just sizing the actual plot point for bytes coming in, but if it has a red or pinkish hue around that plot point, that means it's stripped the IDS signature multiple times. Here's the visualization perspective of marrying those individual data sets. I'm also coloring the plot points by country. So you can see here my legend for country. If I click on the United States, you can see that it's the vast majority of this data. So the vast majority of external IPs that are flowing data into my network are from the United States. So you know, that's okay. A lot of our information security experts will tell us that that is kind of okay behavior. We want to take a look at external forces as well. But I can definitely highlight Russia, take a look at the machine, the data that's coming in from Russia, take a look at the data that's coming in from South Korea, for example, and I can manipulate that this way. But it would be great if I could just filter out the United States. And currently, you know, what I could do is I can bring up my builder, and on my builder is the first time your first opportunity to see the lens and the builder kind of in action. So on the left-hand side, all of the measures, all of the dimensions that I wanted from my data set and brought into my lens is over here on the left-hand side. So I can essentially use any of these metrics and dimensions. I can create new metrics and dimensions on the fly as well. I currently have my source IP location country already in my chart. I already have it here in my legend. So I can just add it as a filter as well. And I'll switch this over to exclude mode. So I want to exclude the United States. And so, you know, I can either filter by just taking a look at the United States, but I think it's a little bit more interesting to take a look at the data as we exclude all data from the United States. Now that we're taking a look at that information with the exclusion, I can take a look at the various kind of plot points that have made itself available. One second here as I reload this page. The data sets that become available now, I'm looking at this chart from the perspective of just the countries that are coming from the United States, and I can take a look at the contextual data of the data that's coming in, look at only the countries that are flowing data into us, and then make a decision as to what should I do about this. What can I do to prevent this, to prevent the kind of intrusion that's coming in from outside of my network. So let's take a look at the individual plot points here. Let me hover over some of these charts and show you kind of isolations that I can do. Now I'm looking at just outside agents and have a completely different view. Now we have really big red points. I could take a look and hover over. We can take a look at this data that's coming from Peru. The SIP blacklisted line shows null, so this guy happens not to be on a blacklist. Maybe it should be on a blacklist, perhaps as a candidate to become part of a blacklist. But each one of these points now represent data that's coming from another country, from outside my network in. Now these big guys can be of interest, but if I'm a network analyst, I'm kind of interested in this guy over here on the right-hand side, IP 10.1.64.21. Why? Not because this one is not the one that's bringing in the most data from exterior IPs, but this is the machine that's bringing in data from multiple IPs, from different countries, and they've all tripped IDS signatures. This is a problem machine, right? So I can then go ahead and isolate the selection. Now I'm looking at a very concentrated IP inside my system. I can highlight over one of these points, and you see some contextual information here. I can see the DIP, the destination port. I can see that it's coming over a known exploitable port. It's going over what we call XZIP 60068 port, which we know is a vulnerable port. We know we're going over TCP/IP. Oh, and by the way, the source IP happens to be on a blacklist. Why hasn't this IP been blocked out? Someone needs to block this IP immediately. Someone should be talked about this. We know the country it's coming from. We know the byte to packet ratio. All this information is coming from multiple systems in one unified view. In a different type of environment, if I found an anomaly, I might have to go to my SIEM tool for one question. Then I have to go somewhere else for a blacklist set. All that while we're creating additional queries. It's error prone, it's time intensive. With PLATFORA, I'm looking at it from one view. I see in this one spot I was able to identify bad machines from a suspect IP, and it's going across suspect port vulnerability. This is something we want to take advantage of. At this point, I can create a comma delimited file. I can certainly share this as an image. I can download this as a JSON file. I can share this as I showed previously in terms of that collaboration and leaving messages, etc. But this is extremely actionable. And this kind of answer couldn't have been found without the ability to scale all this data, bring all this data at scale and be able to see the correlation in multiple data sets together. So from the perspective of conclusions, let me go ahead and go back to my slides here. From a cybersecurity and big data analytics perspective, because cybersecurity is a big data problem, you want to be able to collect and store data that comes from a variety of sources. And inevitably, they're going to be in variety of formats as well. Some very structured, probably not so structured, but many of them completely unstructured. Right? You want to be able to scale to multi-terabyte ranges. That means that as a network analyst, cannot depend on the memory on one particular node. It cannot depend on the memory of one particular laptop. It has to be able to scale across multiple nodes. We want to be able to correlate events from different sources. Within PLATFORA, we have the capability of what we consider time analysis, so event series analysis. We want to be able to segment this data properly. So as we identified country Netherlands on an exploitable port, we might want to publish that segment so it can be used in other areas. That kind of capability is available within PLATFORA. That contextual information is why an event is interesting, right? And then we want to be able to provide that platform for advanced analytics. What you don't want to have is a system that provides you a solution for today, but it's really not extensible for the problems that come tomorrow. And what Wayne mentioned, he's talking about kind of like these unknown threats. We want to know the known threats, but how do we then discover the unknown threats, the future threats? You want to have a platform that can grow with you, that you can add new questions and you can add new data sets and can grow along with this kind of problem, because we know the problem is not just today. The problem will grow exponentially as we move forward. So that is my part of it. I'd like to thank you. I'm going to hand this back to Tim. Again, Chris O'Shea with PLATFORA, and very happy to have your time today.
Great job, Chris and Wayne. Wonderful background, and Chris, it's always a brave endeavor to do a live demo, and you did it very well. So my hat's off to you. So we are now moving on to our Q&A portion of today's webinar. The audience members out there, you'll see the slide, provides both Wayne and Chris's direct contact information. So should you have additional questions after today's webinar, you can feel free to reach out to them directly. First question is, the market is rather crowded out there with different technology. Can you describe a little bit more detail in terms of how you think PLATFORA is different?
So I'll take that first one, and Wayne, you can give a little bit more color in terms of the other tools that are available. From a PLATFORA perspective, we found that PLATFORA is a phenomenal cyber tool. The ability to bring in these different data sets, regardless of what system you have in place, if it's an open source or it's proprietary, we're able to bring this all in and have that kind of unified perspective to be able to identify low and slow attacks at scale. So from my perspective, and it's more of a a techie PLATFORA perspective, it's about the ability to handle a lot different and at scale, over historical context. And maybe Wayne, you can give a little bit more information about kind of the other tools that are available in landscape.
Okay, well, so I've worked with a variety of different technologies that are being leveraged right now, and the nice thing about PLATFORA, and one of the things that being a PLATFORA adopter from early on, one of the things that I really liked about PLATFORA, and it was kind of reinforced working with you on your newest release is that self-service aspect. So working with Chris and Keith McClellan, we came up with, I introduced them to several different families of analytics. Some analytics that are more of the known threat legacy kind of problem, and then also some dealing with, the NoSQL, more statistical analysis. And PLATFORA was awesome on both those. There are a variety of solutions. Splunk and some of the other solutions are out there are really ideal for the segment of the market that they work in. They're highly adopted. They're really good tools. They're well received by customers. But the difference with PLATFORA is finding something that works natively on Hadoop that can scale. When you see this demo, we pulled all of this data in. We were doing analysis easily within a week. It was no, and this was to people that didn't necessarily have experience with the data sources prior to this episode. So.
Okay, very good. In line with that question, we have a specific, comparison. So the question is, what are the biggest differences between PLATFORA and a standard SIEM tool like Envision?
So the nice thing, one of the things that I've really enjoyed about working with PLATFORA, and I am familiar with a lot of the SIEM technologies, is PLATFORA. So a SIEM is a specific use a specific set of use cases that it is designed for. The nice thing about PLATFORA is if I come in, one of the analytics that we were working with was distance of communicator between source IP, dest IP. This was something that we talked about, and we had a running model within 10 minutes. SIEMs are purpose-built, and doing that kind of what if, when you get into that unknown threat area, having a platform like PLATFORA that enables me to go wherever the data takes me is very powerful. Good?
Okay, very good. Are you finished there, Wayne, or Chris, did you want to comment?
No, that's about it. Yeah, he knows
Okay.
those products out there.
Okay, no problem. So the next question is, do I need to learn Hadoop in order to learn how to use PLATFORA?
So yeah, I'll take that real quickly. So the answer is no. From a business analyst or network analyst perspective, the data set is done. That obfuscates all the complexities and what's underneath, and in this case is Hadoop. PLATFORA is using Hadoop because we see this paradigm shift of this kind of structured RDBMS data BI technology of ages old, moving into this new kind of big data analytics. And what that means is a lot of different data at scale, but different formats, et cetera. The different formats and all of that complexity would make it very difficult for folks to use that. So what we're trying to do is eliminate that. So PLATFORA is going to create this kind of semantic layer, this data set and lens, so that someone who doesn't know a Hadoop can take advantage. They can walk into PLATFORA and they're essentially dragging and dropping, and when you want to manipulate your lens, it's a self-service environment and you would not know it's Hadoop unless you were told it was Hadoop.
Okay, very good. This is a specific question for Wayne, and the question is, what kind of work on unknown threats is done in the industry today?
There's a variety of different work that's being done, both commercially and in research institutions. I think a lot of those are more associated with social networking, I think is what. So when you look at a network, understanding the relationship between A and B, why do A and B have a relationship? What is the nature of that relationship, and how does it change over time? When I say A and B, I mean, it's a massive network, getting down to kind of a nodal map of the different nodes of my network. That's where I see a lot of work being done. I also, keeping in mind, I'm talking about commercial customers here. I'm not talking about any of my other customers. Also dealing with things where statistical characterization over time, what is the probability that something would happen between two actors, things along those lines. I have seen, it's in its infancy, but you're starting to see some things kind of solidify in certain areas. In the area of social networking, time series analysis, clustering, outlier detection, things along those lines.
Okay, very, very good. Thank you, Wayne. In line with this question, you might have answered it to some degree, but I'm going to ask it in case there's additional information. But the question is, in terms of cybersecurity being in transition, do you think this solution will be relevant 5 years from now?
Actually, when I was walking through my portion of the presentation, so the answer is unequivocally yes. And the reason being is it is agnostic about the problem that it is, it's the Swiss Army knife. It, on the one hand, will shepherd us through this transition period from signature and known, threat environment into a more statistical modeling approach to cybersecurity. The fact that it is not a point solution built to do a specific function, it being a platform opposed to a specific niche solution, I think is what guarantees, coupled with the cost point, that it'll be around in 5 years.
Okay, always good to know, and I think that's a very good question to ask.
Next
question is, how does PLATFORA work with multi-structured data sources? So again, how does PLATFORA work with multi-structured data sources?
Yeah, so this is a Chris question. The way we handle multi-structured data sources, and I'm assuming we're talking about like nested arrays within JSON and XML files, we have built into the solution within the parser step that I showed in demonstration, the ability to normalize a lot of those nested arrays, and not just normalize it, but keep the parent information. So this is important because as cybersecurity logs get more sophisticated and they export in more than just a comma delimited format, they're going to start taking advantage of some of the big data kind of formats. PLATFORA has thought this through in terms of the way we parse that. So we have the ability to take those multi-structured data sets and sort of flatten them out, if you will, for the purposes of querying them. And if you remember, we also have that regex library as well. So anything that's very complex, we can take advantage of that library to be able to parse out any additional kind of multi layers.
Okay, and I think this question also applies is in the same thread of what you're just speaking of. So does PLATFORA support batch queries, or should PLATFORA be used to design queries that would run on another tool like Hadoop or MapReduce?
No, PLATFORA is going to run queries within PLATFORA. There isn't a need to extend it to another tool because what we do in our lens process, when we create that lens, essentially that guy is a batch process when we create that lens. That being said, our lens can be refreshed on based on whatever data latency requirements are out there. And for us, that could be minutes, 5-10 minutes, and we could refresh our lens. So there isn't a need to sort of expose this to another tool. We feel very confident that the PLATFORA environment as a full stack solution not only provides the self-service to the data, but the visualization and the querying component, the analytics component, very robust. It's also built on a foundation that can become even better, over time. So you want to keep it there. Now we do have ways to share. We're not being, unfriendly to the ecosystem, but we're very confident that we can do everything within the stack.
Okay, good to know. Chris, I think this is another question for you. Your demo covered some sources of enrichment data. Do those come with the solution?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. The answer is yes. So you have within your organization certain data sets like NetFlow data, IDS, snort signatures, maybe some additional logs that you want to bring into the solution. We bring those guys in. But from an external data set like the blacklist data sets, the port exploitation, a lot of customers are beginning to develop those guys in-house and will use those. But if you don't have it, we will provide them.
Okay, excellent. So just a few more questions, then we'll start to wrap things up. How does this solution you've been discussing help me determine real-time problems? It seems, at least from this user's or attendee's perspective, more reactive versus proactive.
More reactive.
Well, let me take my first stab, and Wayne, I'm sure you have a lot of information around the kind of like real-time alerting. The first and foremost, again, to the previous question, we will refresh our lens very often, within minutes, 10 minutes, or what have you. So you have those kind of capabilities within PLATFORA, so you can see the real-time alert with the other contextual information within the system. Now, not to take away from other solutions. There's some solutions that do great, per minute, per second. But the problem with them is that barking dog analogy that Wayne was mentioning. Sometimes those systems are just firing off all the time, and they just become part of the noise. So with PLATFORA, what we find very important is not just to have the real-time alerting, but to have it in the context of all these other metrics that we could begin to formulate a real score, something that will, when that tripwire is tripped, it's a very, very important alert. So the ability to bring in that kind of real-time data but correlated with the data sources is very important. I don't know, Wayne, if you have anything else to add to that.
Well, when you talk about the notion of real time, you are talking about a network. You're really speaking in milliseconds. So, the notion of real time, what we were pointing out here was looking for, so using the kill chain, which is becoming more and more common, looking at that type of model, what we did was we focused on the precursor activity that would be used for a futuristic attack. So on the one hand, you would look at it as reactionary, when in reality it is not. It is identifying the precursors to a potential episode, recognizing that the exploit cycle may go anywhere from 24 hours to 7 days. So really, we're identifying the ground laying activity by a potential malicious actor or state to make recommendations real time that this port needs to be closed, this machine's having a conversation that it shouldn't be having, things along those lines.
Okay, very good. I think we have time for one more question, so we'll let this be the last one. How is the PLATFORA solution different than any of the other newcomers to the cybersecurity domain?
Chris, you want to take that, or you want to?
I'll take the first, and I think you can close with a little bit more contextual information. But just from a different cybersecurity solutions, is that they do end up becoming individual siloed solutions, and they address certain things, and they're scoring certain threats in their own way. But they're not an extensible solution, and they're certainly not platforms. So what PLATFORA is giving us is this environment where not only are we unifying all this data, but more importantly, from my perspective, is that it's going to grow over time. So again, if I go back to a PLATFORA hat, we're talking about the ability to scale, the ability to be self-service, and the ability to handle variety of data sets. And it's very, very important as we move forward in cybercrime. So, Wayne?
Chris gave a much better answer than I ever could. But the key point that I want to lay out is that, so I work with quite a few of the different solutions that have come out, and a lot of the time they represent, he was using his analogy. To me it represents a lot of the time stovepipe thinking. I'm going to write a solution that identifies the precursors to cybercrime. Excellent. That is representative of cybercrime that you have seen in the last 12 months or last 4 years, which will change next year, and your solution will be a rock. So really, it's about having a platform that is versatile, that can deal with malware in the morning, that can deal with network intrusion in the afternoon and exfiltration in the evening. That kind of versatile platform that as the threat evolves, you evolve with it, that makes the difference.
Okay, we'll leave it at that. You have the final word then, Wayne. So very good questions. Thank you, audience, and very thoughtful and good answers to those questions. For those of you that didn't get their questions answered today, rest assured everything's going to be sent over to both Wayne and Chris, and they will be replying to you. And again, you can ask them questions following today's webinar using their contact information provided. I just have a few quick announcements to make. So please mark your calendars for the next Data Science Central webinar on July 8th, sponsored by Pivotal, From Data Silos to Data Lakes. Also, as I mentioned, today's webinar is being taped. It will be made available later on this afternoon at datasciencecentral.com. You can click on the webinar tab at the top of the page as well. This brings today's webinar to a close. I'd like to thank our audience again for their attendance and thoughtful questions, and a special thank you to PLATFORA for their sponsorship, and to both Chris and Wayne for their insight and perspective on today's topic. My name is Tim Madison. I'm very pleased to have been your host for today's event, and I look forward to seeing you all again on July 8th. Good day.